It is the very last day of the week. Hi, everybody. Dana, your host, the nuclear proctologist.org. Call in at 709-589-4406 or text. If you're having a good day, we're just going to jump right into it. Just going to jump right into it on this Thursday show. We do our shows typically Sunday to Thursday at the same time. It's 5 days a week. Now, I screwed up last week, so we didn't have a show on Sunday. The International Atomic Energy Agency is everything but. Go back to 2018 for a split second. 2018 Great Fossil Fuel Phase Out, which is what you're seeing right now, 5 years later. French ex-president Nicolas 2018 Sarkozy arrested for $42 million in illegal campaign funds from the despicable acts they done to Gaddafi on live stream on the internet when he eradicated him like a cockroach. Fukushima rice to be exported to France on the same day. So Sarkozy is indicted and arrested for $42 million in fraudulent money. And by miraculous, the exports of Fukushima are not allowed into the country. That doesn't kind of make any sense, does it? Well, Japan, in order to get its food in the countries, will get rid of anybody that's holding up that export and replace them with somebody that will just let the food come in, like Boris Johnson, for instance. Amount of food with radioactive cesium exceeding government standards are dropping. That was right after the 7th anniversary, I think. The government standards for radioactive cesium came into effect on April 2012. So for the first year and 3 weeks or something, they didn't have a standard for radioactive and cesium, which is ridiculous to suggest it's just cesium. But that's their story, and apparently they're sticking to it. Fukushima rice to be we end up going back up or something. We'll get there. The rice to be exported to France. I have to put that on screen. The big screen. I plan to increase Fukushima's shipments of rice to Britain 2018 to increase it. So they're already shipping it to Britain, the rice. Who knows what else, but the rice for sure. And at the same time, Ichibori Masse was going to Britain and France and promoting food from the nuclear wasteland. There was a big push, and it was successful, by the way. Just to try to give you some context, temporary radioactive soil storage sites hinders Fukushima farmers. Radioactive storage sites are slowing down the farmers. What have I got done? Bear with me. We got a poll, a peculiar poll, somewhere. Should we build safe geothermal plants? Because geothermal is under everybody's feet. Instead of trying to develop small modular reactors. We're getting so many stories with small modular reactors. It seems like everybody's got it in the political sphere, and the university's got to come out and get on one knee, so-called bend the knee and kiss the ring of the nuclear industry, despite the fact that small modular reactors that they got everybody pumped on doesn't even exist. Everybody's all hyped up. They're going to fix everything, but they don't even exist. Not even one of them. Better chances of finding a unicorn than a small modular reactor. on May the 4th, 2023. Mysterious cancers are killing we got 5 or 6 of these. I want to get through. Mysterious cancers killing sea lions along the U.S. West Coast. The bones inside are turning to mush. The west coast of the continent. Where Fukushima radioactive fallout is hanging out. Animals dying at an alarming rate. Well, this can't be good. Fatally high levels of radioactive material, thank goodness they didn't say cesium, I was going to scream if I saw that, has entered the ocean. Serious pollution is ongoing, 2016. No, Dana, it's all going in the tanks, Dana. Okay, I'm just saying. We may be on the precipice of a major extinction event in marine wildlife. I was actually on the ocean doing research expeditions when that headline came out. It was horrible in January of 2016. West Coast bird die-off is the biggest ever recorded. The stomachs are completely empty. No, Dana, that was the bird flu back then, Dana. Stomachs were completely empty, unheard of, staggering, alarming, unprecedented in size and scope and duration. Now they call it the bird flu, and everybody goes, have a nice day. Death could reach hundreds of thousands. No, there was a million Cassini auklets. They eat the microscopic animals, and there was 1.4 million MERS, common MERS, and they dive 600 feet all day long. They feed on anchovies, squid, sardines, krill, and stuff like that. Or stuff that doesn't matter, right? And so you had 2 major die-offs of 2 different species, and there's more than the common MERS, by the way. But you had 2 major die-offs of species that were at 2 different levels of the food spectrum. Right? One was microscopic, and one was 6, 7, 8, 9-inch crustaceans and fish and chummies like that. Extinction threat for salmon, loss of sardines, squid, sea urchins. Gee, that sounds like the bird flu to me. Kelp, that definitely got to be the bird flu. What else could possibly do it, right? The sea star deaths, that definitely sounds like bird flu. Oh yeah, mammal strandings, mass starvation. Definitely bird flu, Dana. I know it. You don't have to convince me. You're preaching to the choir here. Animals are starving as the food chain continues to collapse. 2017, January, I was on the ocean at that time getting the shit kicked out of me, being vilified, demonized online while I was out there, being barbarized and terrorized by the Pacific Ocean. Temporary radioactive soil storage sites hinder the Fukushima farmers. What the hell are you talking about? Surely the hell the farmer's not growing food alongside of 1 ton bags of radiation data. Don't try to convince me that one. I'm not. I'm not saying nothing. I never said that. You said that. It appears to me in the newspaper to show a picture of farmers harvesting food right alongside of 1 ton bags of radiation. It can't be what it is. That can't be what it was. Rice paddies in the foreground serve as a temporary storage site for piles of black plastic bags that are containing pizza. No. Peaches. No. Radioactive soil? Woo! Dana finally got something right. Rice paddies in the foreground serve as a temporary storage site, and 90% of the storage sites are farmland, by the way. Didn't stop them. American, we can't grow food. There's 1 ton bags of radiation. Canada, we're pretty bad, but we can't grow food right there, man. It's, 1 ton bags of radiation. Come on, you're in a no-go zone. Japanese, sure. $6 an hour, you pay now. Slightly over 90% of the temporary, there's 150,000 of these temporary storage sites on farmlands. 90% of them. Well, thank goodness they're not crazy enough to grow food there, Dana. I know, that's what I'm saying. As long as the temporary storage sites, aka nuclear fallout, remains here, farmers will lose their motivation. You sure it's not the radioactive poisoning from work alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation? Because it does work that way too. This was just a wonderful headline. Fukushima 7 years later, case closed. You got the experts, the IAEA experts, in charge, the authority, I might add, with reviewing Japan's plans for the Fukushima nuclear facility, okay? And they're going to leave Unit 4 in 2013. Now, I'm not being picky or something, but one of the things I like to point out, I'm not saying they're lawyers or nothing, but the building behind them is supposed to be Reactor 4. It's supposed to be 190 feet tall. I'm just saying, I'm not trying to be a wise guy, smart ass, I'm just saying. It appears to me that there's some confusion in that picture with what the story is claiming. The majority of the 1,000+ hearings given by the people involved have remained confidential. And this is troubling. Why would a democratic society allow hearings given to a parliamentary commission to remain silent? It's not to allow hearings. We're talking about thousands behind closed doors. And then we're going to grow rice there. Oh, this is a great story. If there's such a thing as a great story in nuclear, is there such a thing as a great story in nuclear? We got to have a poll, actually, about that one of these days. We went pretty straightforward tonight. We got a simple poll in it, and it's impossible to get this one wrong. Should we build safe geothermal plants instead of trying to develop small modular reactors? Because it could take 50, 60, 70 years and extra. Well, we have been going over 50 years. We haven't done it. It could take another 50 years. But I heard from a friend who heard from a friend who heard from his first cousin's uncle, brother-in-law, that geothermal plants actually exist. That's true, I swear. I swear it. Yeah, we had a bunch of beer and everything, but I remember distinctly being told that geothermal plants exist. Oh, God. So Hanford, every time it's just like, 3 years later, Hanford nuclear waste cleanup negotiators revealed this breakthrough. 3 years after what? How long have you been trying to clean this up again? 70 years or something? This is great, though. You're going to like this. Department of Energy, whoever those creatures are, they're a different species than the average human. And the state of Washington, there's another different breed of creatures that don't probably got any human DNA in them, have reached a conceptual agreement on revisiting plans for cleanup. Clean. And nuclear, how does that even work, those two words? Of Hanford's radioactive waste. Oh, yeah, in underground tanks after nearly 3 years of negotiations. 3 years of playing dice in an alley 1,000 miles away, I think is what they meant to say. The public will be allowed to comment on draft changes. Well, that's mighty nice of you. Are you going to listen to them or read them? Of course not. It's about the consent decree and also the tri-party agreement before the tri-party agreement is changed and the consent decree changes are approved by a federal judge. Sounds like quite the workaround to me. The Hanford site adjoining Richland in eastern Washington is, it's 585 square mile nuclear wasteland. Produced almost 2/3 of the plutonium, and they had 50-something thousand nuclear weapons. For the nation's nuclear weapons program from World War II through the Cold War. and forever, ever after. Now, in Hanford, they give them Scotty backpacks and they give them actual overalls. In Fukushima, they give them paper suits. So get out there. You got a shelf life of a couple of days. If you get sick and worked 8 hours at Hanford, by the way, you're entitled to a pension. It's true, I swear to goodness. They went through the Supreme Court last year. The effort left a 580 square mile site with 56 million. Oh my goodness, that's so much. Gallons of radioactive and other hazardous waste in underground tanks awaiting treatment for 50 years, 60 years or something. I got a little tickle in my throat. There's nothing I can do about it. Sue me. Plus contaminated soil, groundwater, buildings, waste sites, all the other stuff. Legacy of the Cold War. Over its lifespan, nuclear production discharged 450 billion gallons of radioactive liquid into the soil at Hanford. Okay. Today, 200 square miles of aquifer beneath Hanford is contaminated. 200 square miles of aquifer. And 53 million gallons of radioactive chemical and hazardous waste from the separation in the mixed oxide, which is irradiated, is stored in 177 leaky, there's that word again, underground tanks. All right, so bear with me because I just screwed that up, didn't I? That's what I do. I screw shit up. I'm so good at it too. My apologies. Okay, so you got 177 Danas. Now you got 177. Where the hell is this robot coming from? So you got 450 billion gallons. Howdy, Mr. Sorry, but my apologies. Damn robots don't know when. Okay, so what you got up here is 560 billion or 56 million gallons divided by 177 tanks is 316,000 gallons per tank. Right, 177 tanks. So 450 billion gallons divided by 316,334 gallons, which is a tank, right? Ended up with 1.4 million tanks. 1.4 million. 222 or 1,422,483 tanks. 1.4, so, but we're worried about 53 or 56 million gallons in 177 tanks. So 1.422483. So subtract 177 tanks from that. And when you wake up tomorrow morning, see if you can remember what the original number was. So instead of worrying about the tanks, shouldn't we be trying to recover that? It was dumped in the soil. It's the same stuff that is in the tanks. So should we worry about the 177 tanks or the 1.4 million tanks that they dumped into the soil? Is that a stupid, silly question, or am I being stupid and silly? Okay, it's hard to comprehend it, right? 450 billion gallons. 450 billion gallons. This incredible stew. This incredible stew, 450 billion gallons, is equal to a wall of 1-ton bags. This is dangerous by the liter. 6 feet wide and 518 feet tall and wrapped around the entire planet once. So a 6 foot thick wall, 518 feet tall, wrapped around the entire planet. Should we worry about that? That's dumped in the soil, because that's what they dumped into the soil. Or should we worry about the 177 tanks that are the leaky tanks? Do you see how they trick you and manipulate you and deceive you? You might just think about how revolting that actually is, because he wants billions and billions. They've already spent tens of billions of dollars and over 20 years trying to build a facility to do the pre-sorting. You can't sort this stuff. And my video from last night, I never got a single thumbs up in 20 plus hours. Not one single thumbs up. It's got 100. I got one view an hour after 10 a.m. this morning till now. It averaged one view an hour. It's got 41 thumbs up. In the last 20 hours, it never got a thumbs up. That's crazy. That's some absurd censorship. Because it was a really good video, actually. But you can see what they're doing to me, right? And so the average person comes through, oh, they got 40 thumbs up, they got 130 views. I'm not watching that. They can't be any good. They don't know what they're talking about. It's been going on for a long time. This last couple of months, you've seen them just in big chunks, right? So 100 people all of a sudden decided not to watch my video. All the videos are basically a news cycle for 24 hours. Although it'll be, they're censoring me now, but somebody will censor them later, right? Although the state and federal agencies were limited on what they could discuss, limited? Well, what are you, limited? You got 1.4 million tanks dumped into the soil, but you're worried about 177 that are leaky. It's absurd, isn't it? And as you read through it, you see the incredible absurdness. 20 years at the pre-treatment facility. Once they fire up, and they even called it a glassification facility, which is, I used that term about 5 years ago. I got attacked. No, there's no such thing as a glassification, which is true, technically, right? But I put it in the right context where I said they were actually building it. Once you turn the keys on it, you can never go in the building again. They expect to be finished by about 2036, or I'm sorry, 2046, another 13 years. So it'll take them roughly 33 years to build it, and they can't go back in and fix it. Good old net zero, thank goodness. Net zero for the grid is not possible without nuclear energy. We're hearing that a lot all of a sudden in 2023. That's a new cliche now. That's the new swag. Bottom line, for the most part, nuclear is not a fuel type that's getting a lot of attention from the U.S. power generations. It's on the books. It's something like 4 gigawatts in the future is all they got on the books. This is the furthest thing. They got to get someone to build it. They can't build it themselves. Same thing with Canada. Has only got maybe 1 gigawatt in experimental reactors between Moltec and NuScale and a few others. And again, this is ludicrous to suggest they're actually going to build a reactor. But what it does is this fake hype of these small modular reactors. They displace real technology that exists and it is perfect, like geothermal. Should we build safe geothermal plants instead of trying to develop small modular reactors, nuclear reactors? Then they can build them in factories. They can build them quicker, cheaper, economic scales. They can put them on trucks and ship them to the site. Bring them back, bring in another one. It's like swapping out batteries in your camera, Dean. Okay, I'm just trying to say they don't actually have one, so you can't quantify those assertions when you don't actually got one. Just saying. Have a nice day. These findings stand in sharp contrast to the cost and waste reduction benefits that advocates have claimed for advanced nuclear technology. For the waste streams, you're looking at 35% low level, which is very dangerous, by the way. But compared to fuel rod, it's not as bad, but it's still going to kill you. There's 30 times more intermediate level waste. This will kill you for sure pretty quickly. And there's 5 times more fuel rods. 35 times more high level waste and 5 times more fuel rods. Not only that, the fuel rods are going to be mixed oxide. They had no ideas what to do with mixed oxide, and the fuel pool is vicious. It's splitting the atoms. That's the problem with nuclear waste, is it's splitting the atoms. And all nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms. Total coincidence, of course. Only around 10% of those units are planned for the U.S. energy sector for combined 4.3 gigawatts of power. It's humiliating, actually, I would imagine, for the nuclear industry. It's about time, isn't it? That's why you see him in such desperation, I suppose. Maybe we won and we didn't even know it. I mean, just because they're censoring me don't mean I'm going to go away and give up or something. This is not about me. This is about Earth. This is about species. I'm probably the worst one for the job in many senses. There's a million better people than me out there, but they won't pick up the baton. I keep trying to pass it to them, and they won't take it. So I got to sit here and get slaughtered constantly and vilified, demonized. It's the normal day for Dana, unfortunately. That's the rest of my future will be like that, I'm pretty sure. Small modular reactors are moving forward globally. Yeah, really? Where? When? Rolls-Royce small modular reactors is almost 500 megawatts. It's the furthest thing from a small modular reactor. No, Dana, but we're going to call it. Doesn't even matter. We're going to call it clean. We're going to get rid of the word renewable and say clean technology. And guess what? Nuclear is clean. Nuclear is absurd resource intensive, every facet of it, from the very conception to the millions of years of emissions. We are tracking about 20 in U.S. and Canada in various stages of development. None of them are in any stage of development. None of them even have an actual whole license into the regulatory agencies. It's a complete, from major media, but it's complete fabrication of the facts. Very, very terrible journalism. I think we used to call it yellow journalism. Now we're like, what the hell is a journalist? I got to get a dictionary, look up the word journalist. I can't find one out there. America's nuclear waste capital wants more of it. Well, that's nice of them. Against the state's wishes. A half-mile underground beneath a windswept field in the southwest corner of New Mexico, hundreds of workers hauled drums of radioactive waste into a salt mine that will entomb them for at least 10,000 years. 10,000 years, not long enough. Once it goes China syndrome there, it'll eat the salt, it'll atomize and aerosol that, and it'll create pressure, and it'll detonate, and that'll split the earth wherever it's to, and then it'll emit forever. That's why Britain wants to dig one under the ocean, and other countries too. So, because there is no solution. They're not trying. Up on the surface, federal officials overseeing the engine's energy department's waste isolation pilot plant, it used to be called pilot project, if I remember correctly, it was supposed to be an experiment, not a repository, are working harder than ever to smooth over tension with state officials and skeptics in the state capital so the facility can meet its mission, because they want to take high-level waste. Meet its mission of cleaning up the country's nuclear weapons production sites. But it wasn't its mission. Its mission was a experiment to see how burying steel in salt caverns was going to play out. WIP is the only geologic repository for nuclear waste in the country, and the Energy Department has used it for one of the world's largest environmental cleanup missions. Hanford would just qualify for that on its own, let alone all the other national laboratories across the country. One of the world's largest environmental cleanup missions. They got tons of them when it comes to nuclear. Navajo got 15,000 abandoned uranium mines and chemical ponds. The mine employs about 1,500 people. They'll cut your throat to keep that job. And the perks and the pays and the bursaries so their children can get a job there later. Now hold drums full of roughly 2.6 million cubic feet of tools, clothing, soil, and other objects contaminated by research, aka a disaster. Development of the atomic bomb and a nuclear arms race. So it's supposed to be just gloves and tools and clothing and little bits of soil, right? So then how did it melt down in 2014? Because that stuff doesn't melt down. 9 years later, they still haven't replaced air exchanger. People in Carlsbad, New Mexico, near WIP, have always liked it for the jobs. Yeah, I'm sure they do now. That's nice of you to put words in their mouth. Under pressure from nuclear opponents who worry the state has become a nuclear dumping ground, they want the authorities under a 10-year hazard waste permit to halt shipments if they see an environmental or a health threat, which don't that make perfect sense? Or if new legislation from Washington increases its disposal limits. Well, right now its limits is 6 million metric tons. Then they got 2.3 or something in it. They jacked those numbers up. And on top of that, a couple of years ago, they actually clawed back some of the waste that they put on the ground by saying there was open spaces at the top of the containers, and therefore that didn't count as nuclear waste. See? So then they clawed back an absurd amount of cubic feet. New Mexico, and that's so early in the game they've done that, right? New Mexico also wants the Energy Department to begin looking for repositories in other states. Well, you just said out of one side of your mouth that everybody was happy that you were there. We need to reclaim our authority in many ways that the permit is going to do, said Kennedy, the state's environmental secretary. Scary. Who says the Energy Department has treated New Mexico as an afterthought. We need authority to stop shipments, which is true. Way to go. Hang on, James Kennedy. Way to go, man. To stop waste streams, to acquire investigations if there's problems. Because currently it's not illegal to poison you with radiation, right? Congress doesn't have the authority either to make it, or Parliament in Canada, for instance, don't have the authority. Only the nuclear regulatory agencies does. And there's zero nuclear regulatory agencies anywhere on the planet made it illegal to poison you. If they made it illegal to poison you, couldn't use it in hospitals, right? To kill you with it. The state's stance infuriates community leaders in Carlsbad, a town of 32,000. Local officials hoping to wean off the boom and dust industries like oil see WIP as a stable economic driver and a good neighbor that was abandoned for 3 years after a nuclear meltdown. Hey, they threw $6 billion at it. And they want more nuclear, and they paid off everybody, right? They want more nuclear facilities, including a nearby private site. Like, nuclear shouldn't be going to a private site. That could be owned by any pro-nuclear scumbag, right? Where a developer plans to store spent nuclear fuel from civil reactors. Well, nuclear universities should be at the storage sites. That way, right, the students can get hands-on experience like you do with nursing, right? I'm just saying. Efforts to garner community consent for nuclear waste, which is really important, right? You ever heard the story of Albert Haushoff? He was a Geolog, geologist from the University of Berlin when the war was raging over in Europe. And he got that job by keeping his mouth shut. And eventually he's seen a lot of his Jewish friends getting wrapped up and taken off to Nazi prisons, and he started getting pains of conscience, and he started writing some dissenting opinions and publishing it, and he started to get a bit of a following. So the Nazis not going to put up with shit like that, and they came to the university and jacked him and took him away to a prison in Berlin. And the Nazis, they were very methodical. They won't execute you until you sign your confession. And Haushofer wouldn't sign his confession. So it was almost at the end of the war, and they shot him anyway. Normally he shoots you or hang you, right? But he wouldn't sign his confession. When he picked up his body, his little settle, his little piece of paper, fell out of his pocket. It was his confession. I don't know if anybody speaks German, but Schultz, guilty. Yeah, I'm guilty, but it's not what you think. I should have Schafa, Unheil. Should have more sharply called evil. I put off my judgment for too long. He said, I did warn, but not enough. And now I know what I'm guilty of. And that's what we're all facing with the nuclear industry. Right? They want to consent. They want you to sign the confession. So, per se, symbolically, and put the nuclear waste in your community so you can't complain later when there's heart problems and liver and lung and respiratory and pituitary and thyroid and adrenaline and Alzheimer's and dementia and autism and diabetes and Down syndrome ravages your community. WIP is a marvelous project and a national treasure. Nuclear wasteland that melted down in 2014, and you claimed you had a truck fire and hid it away from everybody. It took you 3 years to get back. You had to dig more holes in order to do that. 9 years later, you still can't fix the air exchanger because it's too radioactive. And blamed it on kitty litter, the lunatics, eh? Lunatics, right? They actually blame the meltdown on kitty litter, folks. Who has an honorary room in the mine complete with an autographed bolt hammered into the ceiling. So a former Democratic state representative from Carlsbad is John Heaton, got him all the money they needed to get back up and running. Permit becomes a way to stop WIP, and it would be a tragedy to stop WIP. Again, it'd be a tragedy if you had radioactive releases and contaminated all the children and all the farms and all the victims and all the communities so you get a paycheck. But officials have acknowledged they do need to do better in New Mexico's nuclear waste piles up nationwide. Well, you don't even got any reactors in New Mexico, so why are you taking all the waste? And Holtec, Chris Singh wants to set up a high-level nuclear waste site WIP. The story is full of good little tidbits, but it's also full of, unfortunately, a ridiculous amount of propaganda. story kind of caught me off guard because that's what I call nuclear all the time, dirty nuclear power, right? I've never heard anybody else ever say that before. AOC leaves the door open. This was Beyond Nuclear, a writer that wrote that. And I fucking hate them, excuse the language. Helen Caldicott and anybody that ever even... Well, I shouldn't say that, I suppose, but... AOC leaves the door open to dirty, disgusting, despicable nuclear power. Way to go. Congresswoman Alexandria Cortez from New York, we covered her quite a bit over the last few months. But earlier the week, on Monday's show, we covered her, actually. Open door policy to push their agenda in the media and into the halls of Congress. Yeah, she claims she went to Fukushima. Oh, look, it's our crazy friend, Madison Hilly. Man, she ruined so many people's lives. And, she works for Environmental Progress. And she didn't write the article. That was... The only person capable of writing an article like that, let's face it, is... There's two people. There's Rod Adams and Michael Schellenberg, who's the president and the owner and creator of Environmental Progress. And that's who wrote the articles, and she puts her name on it, because anybody sees, usually as soon as you see the word Environmental Progress, you know it's a lobby and a pro-nuclear lobbying group disguised as an environmentalist group. It's really disgusting tactics, but it's nuclear. So there's nothing off the table, it's nuclear, right? There's no low in nuclear that they won't go. There's no... They'll crawl through a pit of maggots if they think it'll promote nuclear. They won't even hesitate. They're used to crawling, see? The radiation she got from her visit was about 2 chest x-rays worth, which is really interesting. They couldn't get into the control room for 7 years, and they could only go in for a few moments and had to run away, which is outside the reactor, but she was in the reactor. Uh-huh. Yeah, sure she was, Timmy. She spoke admiringly of France. She said recycles their waste, which is a bizarre statement. Misleading industry term that masks the highly polluting operations involved in reprocessing, which takes irradiated fuel and separates plutonium in a chemical bath. Of that radiated reactor fuel reprocessed at La Hague Nuclear Center on France's Normandy coast, which has 500 security guards, I might add, 95% of it contains uranium products too contaminated for further use. As trucked south for conversion and storage. And all these facilities, specifically La Hague, for instance, is surrounded by farms as far as you can see from a balloon high above. They're, again, perpetual laws. You can't actually keep up with it every day. And so we never come across nuclear being honest. It's pretty rare, right? They'll always have a lot of deception in there at the same time. If they do say some, they give you little tidbits. And so each day we go through this news cycle that we're lucky enough to be able to do this, and we'll show this incredible contrast of reality and nuclear. Every day the nuclear version is 100% propaganda in every story, and so that has to be coordinated. Right, that can't be an accident. And a lot of certain sentences are passed around story to story to story, like Chernobyl, the world's worst nuclear accident, which is ludicrous assertion, which you see it all the time, that phrase. Backup generator at Calvert Cliffs nuclear plant fails. They didn't know it had failed. The NRC was bored and went out looking for kickbacks and found a little flaw, so they'll get paid for that. Everybody go away smiling. Jamaica to go down, and what was the flaw, Dana? I know, sometimes I'll do that, right? It didn't start up like it's supposed to. And I'm not sure if that particular type. Now, I've heard different stories of, because these are huge generators. These are buildings, right? We're talking about. I've heard it takes up to a day to get them ready to start up. And they count on not having a station blackout, so they don't have to use it. So if you don't train for it, that's more money in the pot, right? Trigger an ongoing special inspection by the non-regulatory agencies. If the nuclear regulatory commissions are involved in any country, it's just like having sending a pirate in there to keep an eye on everything. It's just not going to happen. Jamaica to go nuclear. They're talking about these small modular reactors. Jamaica would be perfect for geothermal energy. Should we build safe geothermal plants instead of trying to develop small modular reactors? Somebody accidentally said no. Well, never would have seen that on my own. That happens, I suppose. Should we build small geothermal instead of something that only... We still got to develop small modular reactors. They'll get there 50, 60, 70, 80 years or something. But we actually got geothermal currently today. Don't need backup. Never misses a day off, never takes a day off. 24 hours, vroom, vroom, vroom. And Jamaica, my goodness, with all the heat they have there. If they switch to geothermal, that'll be the end of it. They'll probably have so much money left over every year. Well, first off, right, the taxpayers are throwing money at the energy industry. They can build whatever they want, whenever they want. The money is constantly flowing in, but they want profit, right? They want to build something to replace an old one because that gets rid of profit. And it took them 30, 40 years to get to the profit, and now they got to replace it because it's old and broken, but they don't want to do it. They don't want to do it anything on the nuclear. Nuclear got his nose into everything. And so while they might not be appropriate, they want to cause a ruckus everywhere they go. Everywhere that uses energy, they want to be talked about. But as we see worldwide, there is no nuclear renaissance. There's a nuclear nosedive. There's uranium nosedive, but there's no nuclear renaissance. And that's because, an average country doesn't need the taxi drivers and, the gas station employees, the restaurant employees. You don't need the consent of the common people or blue-collar workers or anybody else. It's just one or two people in government will make the decision for them without even asking them or letting them know what happened, right? In the stroke of a pen, they sign away everybody's future. And the nuclear industry knows those jobs exist and have targeted them relentlessly for 80 years and have captured the majority of those and all of the regulatory agencies and the monetary agencies. And so there's very little resistance for a lot of places, at least, outside of legislation and stuff like that. Jamaica has to explore new technology in the form of nuclear energy. But what they do is they'll create a nuclear energy in the country, and then they'll allocate hideous amounts of money to it. They don't have to worry about it because they don't have any facilities. So therefore they can loot it every year. It's the perfect scam, Ponzi scam. Small nuclear plants to generate in Jamaica, which is cheaper, more stable, more affordable. Then you can put it on the back of trucks and ship it. You can make it in factories, Dana. But you can't. What do you mean, Dana? They can't. Of course you can't, Dana. They wouldn't be trying to sell you vaporware like that. These are respectable people, don't you know? MP calls on the government to accelerate the Welsh nuclear plant project. Damn it, we gotta get nuclear. They're not going to support us for our next election campaign. MPs have called on the government to further progress on the proposed Wylfa nuclear power station in Wales, which has been stuck in limbo since the disease factory shut down in 2019. Probably not surrounded by farms, though. They're not that evil over there. I don't think anyway. Oh, wait a second. Oh, they're evil over there too. Oh, God, they're so evil. So this is where they want to build a new plant. Just coincidentally, it happens to be surrounded by farms on 3 sides. What's the odds, really? That's amazing. I never thought I'd see something like that. Nuclear plants surrounded by farms. Never would have dreamt it in my wildest dreams. Outright amazing. Don't do it. Don't sell your soul to the nuclear scum. Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant bosses are fleeing in mass, says Kyiv. So the Ruskies are running the plant, right? So they're saying the Russians are running away because they're going to launch an assault. So this is actual propaganda. They're worried about Ukraine's NATO's counteroffensive, because Ukraine's not fighting anybody. It's a proxy war with NATO and Russia. Tories, and they're using Ukraine as the battlefield. Tories abandon efforts to impose. Why is it every time you show the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, this particular one, he looks like that? Every single picture of him. Every picture. He's on a plane, he's picking up kids in his arms, which, by the way, should be illegal for any Prime Minister to hold onto a kid. Nobody knows where those people have been to, see? But every picture of him, it's like someone told him a fart joke or something, and he jumps up and he does a little dance. Now, he married his wife. Her daddy is a billionaire from India. And she's got an amazing education. In fact, they couldn't even get her to leave the university, from what I understand. She was loving it. Just hang out with all the partiers. She got lots of money. UK government has reportedly abandoned efforts to force Scotland to accept nuclear energy. In your dreams. Nuclear minister, because he just created a nuclear minister, right, in the United Kingdom? Nuclear minister, man, my God. If you've got an agenda, then you need a minister for it, right? Nuclear minister. In Canada, apparently, we're going to get Prince Charles on our money really soon. Wait till it happens. It'll be madness. No, I don't want that money. I want the one with the Queen on it. I don't even like her, but I'll take that rather than Charles. Everybody will go into Bitcoin in Canada pretty soon. Nuclear Minister Andrew Bowie said Wednesday was not engaging in a fight with the Scottish government over its long-held stance against dirty nuclear power. Well, that's interesting. I just find it really hard to believe that that's true. Which, by the way, is clean and safe. It's proven, don't you know? No, it's not true. It's propaganda. And the propaganda is, unfortunately, after all these years, frankly, Wad, net zero secretary. So I got a nuclear minister and a net zero secretary. Poor Britain. You poor bastards. What did you ever do to deserve that kind of monstrosity, I wonder? New civil engineer. They wouldn't cut your throat in a heartbeat. Pop-up factories for small modular reactors could transform nuclear project productivity. These are all great, big, stupid, dirty bombs on top of that. Pop-up and this is what it's going to look like. We asked AI, and this is what these popped out. This is what it'll look like. This is a small nuclear reactor factory. Look. You can bring your kids there and play baseball on Saturdays and get a tan on Sunday on the beach down there. They'll take good care of you. It's nuclear. Loves everything and loves nothing. Building small modular, it almost makes me sick to read this. I'll apologize in advance. Within pop-up factories could make the construction of nuclear power capacity faster. Well, they're going to need around 4,400 of these just to replace the current reactors. Last year was 0.4 gigawatts came online in nuclear. They better get in gear. I don't like the way they made shadows either. I think that's pretty dishonest. MPs and scientists raised alarm over climate hype from small modular reactors. Well, what do we got here? That's quite the treat. Several members of the Canadian Parliament and activists, I think when it comes to nuclear, if there's such a word as activists, I should get a little mention, are warning, instead of being censored like I don't exist, are warning the Canadian government that its support for nuclear energy projects could prove costly and ineffective. In other words, crazy. Even as the human trash Trudeau maintains that nuclear is on the table by achieving the country's climate goals. So the nuclear industry gave, now just say, whenever you talk nuclear, just say that sentence and keep your mouth shut after. I'll get you a nice pension after. Saskatchewan looking into whether Ottawa's emission policies can be blocked, Mo says. Mo says. Saskatchewan is Canada, so again, apologize in advance here. You know, this is terrible stories. Canada's brutal nuclear industry is brutal. It's lunatic. I'm not going to read that because that upsets me because I'm Canada, right? Few people know about the 18 Titan II missile silos hiding in several counties in Arkansas. 2 of them blew up, right? I think it is. They had a range of 9,000 miles, so they can hit just about anything, depending which way they went. They could have been the site of a major nuclear catastrophe where 18 intercontinental ballistic missiles scattered throughout several counties in the state. 1953, there was around 55,000 of these missile silos. Some were dummies, right? Silos meant to, and they were publicized, and they were the sacrificial lambs meant to draw fire from Ruskies, or the Soviet Union rather at the time. But there are 2 that stand out the most: the 374-7 and the Marcus, and the 373-4 near Surrey, were the sites of 2 deadly accidents. After a few years of a successful operation, tragedy struck in 1965 when a fire broke out after improvements were made to the facility. 53 civilians lost their lives in a hole in the ground, building weapons to destroy the planet with. The warhead was disarmed, so a major catastrophe was avoided. Except for, the 53 civilians that were foolish enough to go to work for you. Consequently, the missile was at the 373-4 site was relocated to Launch Complex 374-7 and was unfortunately also involved in an accident. Can't take them anywhere, these missiles, eh? A socket, and they got a picture of one there, was accidentally dropped by a worker onto the silo, which damaged the thin fuel tank and caused a leak. After additional mishaps at other facilities, efforts were made by the Reagan administration to dismantle launch sites in Arkansas as well as in other states. Well done. Jolly good. And so you can drive right past them, you'll never know. And they're all hemorrhaging. They got replace the tritium every 11 years or something, which doubles or triples or quadruples the power of the nuclear weapon. But apparently it's harmless if it gets into me or you. They can't contain it in Canada. In Canada, it's just, holy goodness. Georgia couple awarded $135 million for damages from polluted water and land. I smell the nuclear industry involved in this one. So it was a solar farms that, this is crazy. The solar farms hired an engineering company to engineer the berms because they're removing rocks and bushes and stuff like that to set up a solar farm, which left the soil exposed. Now they had an engineering firm. I'll find it here for you. There's 1,000 acres of timberland, farmland, land near the Harris couple that was previously used for recreational hunting and fishing. Without installing adequate measures for erosion sediment, so there are 160 solar panel facilities across the country. Many of them were built by IEA. So when it rained, the pollution, which is soil, poured downhill and downstream into the neighbor's property, inundating wetlands with silt and sediment, turning a 21-acre trophy fishing lake into a mud hole. You see videos of that all the time from rainstorms, right? Caused sedimentation to pollute the plaintiff's wetlands, streams, and lakes. The engineering firm that designed the erosion and sediment control plan for SRC and IEA was released from any liability. So the company that designed that to control that and failed didn't have any liability, but the company now. So it's a good way to demonize it. In Canada, and I say that because in Canada last year, Ontario closed 700 solar wind farms. And they took the $4.3 billion that was for storage for renewable energy and gave it to Bruce Nuclear Power. And Bruce Nuclear Power is going to make storage. But if the money if they didn't close down the 700 wind and solar farms and gave the $4.3 billion to the sites that wanted to build storage, you wouldn't need nuclear or small modular reactors, would you? So they scuttled it and closed down 700 because they competed directly with the nuclear power in Ontario. So they scuttled everybody's future by doing that so they can get a paycheck, right? Billions of bombs. Anybody see this today? How many nuclear bombs will we have to set off to equal the amount of CO2 humankind has ever released? They're saying billions. So there was, I noticed right away, 121 dislikes, only 10 likes. And there was 11 comments. When I went and looked at the comments, I was laughing pretty good. You won't have to worry about the CO2, it's the radiation. What a load of garbage. And so people were really upset with this story. If dumb articles like this don't convince you the media is trying to scare you about CO2, nothing will. All life on Earth depends on CO2 being in the atmosphere to survive. It's not a pollutant or a toxin or even the worst greenhouse gas. Nuclear is. Does honesty in reporting still exist? It doesn't in this ridiculous article. So they got flatlined. Got 121 thumbs down. Billions of bombs is what they were claiming. Billions and billions of bombs. So let me explain why I'm talking like that. So I'll show you the radioactive. Now, this model over in the bottom is 27 days after the tsunami. The whole planet is covered in radioactive fallout from Japan. Gas, oil, and coal emissions don't create plumes like that. You will never find a model of emissions from gas, oil, and coal plants that look like this. Because the particles only go 50, 60, or 100 miles in heavy winds, and then they're big particles. Nuclear is not. Nuclear, you can put 200 million atoms on the head of a needle, but you can't see it. Each atom can make you sick in many different ways. And so that model over there is based on is based on venting. It's not based on detonations and inventories and losses. There's 1,000 fuel pools worldwide that are making plumes like this each day. The plumes never go away, and you can't perceive them. You can't see them or smell them or taste them or hear them or touch them or feel them or pick them up or throw rocks at them or anything else. And so it was really, why would they come out with that video? Why did they come out with a video mocking this narrative? Because the only person using this narrative on the entire planet is right here, by the way. And so the radiation, the reason we use that particular narrative, this is really simple. And if you look at 80 years of emissions, and this is just 20 days right here from Fukushima, if you look at how this works, you got an invisible plume covering the entire planet. Just on its own would be terrible, right? It's pulsing energy every second at the speed of light, each atom, and they never go away. And so every day you got another plume, but you got another plume from 1,000 fuel pools now worldwide with decades of reactor cores. Each reactor core is still splitting the atoms. So every fuel pool is hemorrhaging atoms into your environment. This is why the majority of nuclear power plants worldwide are surrounded typically by farms. Almost all nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms, and typically as far as you can see. That's to suck up the radiation, but that's also meant to poison you at the supermarket, believe it or not. But don't worry, they'll find another way to get at you. So that's global warming. Global warming is 80 years of dumping and hemorrhaging and constant emissions, the splitting of the atoms of particularly the fuel reprocessing facilities worldwide, are vicious emissions into the environment. It never goes away. They're always releasing it, and it bioaccumulates to the point of, again, this model of the radioactive fallout from Japan after 20 days, 19.5 days, 468 hours, is based on venting. It's not based on the actual nuclear meltdowns. So the venting is based on venting, but there was no venting, right? The building is completely gone. They're pretending they're in reactor 4, but it doesn't even exist. And so all these inventories, and they're way above the fuel pools. Look at that. And the fuel pools would be at the top of a 190-foot building that no longer exists. And there was 4 of them who lost the fuel pools. There's 2 of them at the top of each building. And so the Pacific Ocean, North America, the Atlantic Ocean, Iceland, Greenland, you get where I'm going, right? The whole planet after 19.4 days. And it never stopped coming out. That's global warming. Gas, oil, and coal don't make plumes covering the planet, pulsing energy every second for millions of years. So they come out with this ridiculous video, and everybody, they got 121 thumbs down, 10 thumbs up. It's a ridiculous video, and there's only one reason you would make that particular video. It's because the narrative must be getting out there that nuclear is global warming, and the evidence is absolutely incontestable, it's unassailable. Oh my goodness. Sellafield armed police roles offered by Civil Nuclear Constabulary. We got to protect the plants so they can poison everybody. Civil Nuclear Constabulary at Sellafield. Just let me explain Sellafield. enter everything. Oh, we should have a bunch of pictures I want to show you. Or not. To anybody that's planning on working at Sellafield. Oh, I'm not going to find what I want. Just the main thing to remember is Sellafield is surrounded by farms. There's killer hot particles everywhere. They got fuel pools there they haven't even looked at for 60 years. These are brutal emissions. They're outdoors. They got a building there now that they're going to try to decommission, but they can't let oxygen in there because it'll detonate. Walking past it, no one walks past it. You have to run past the building. Nuclear site, they got 500 police security officers at La Hague in France because they don't want you to figure out what's going on. Get a job somewhere else. Don't work there, for goodness sakes. Let the nuclear academics and universities should be working there. There's nothing to protect. No one's going to go in there and steal something. Western Australia, or Australia must adapt the AUKUS, which is the nuclear submarine, $368 billion nuclear power submarine deal. $368 billion. If they use that money for geothermal, which we haven't got a poll tonight, should we build safe geothermal plants instead of trying to develop small modular reactors? And somebody else accidentally voted no. That's kind of weird. $368 billion nuclear power submarine deal. It took half the money and built geothermal. That's their power for the next 50 years for the entire country. Have a nice day. We don't need gas, don't need coal, don't need oil, don't need nuclear. No, sirree, Bob. We got some geothermal. Right? Why not do that? And is that like silly? Dana, that is so silly. Mom, Dana's being silly. I'm a lot of things. It's difficult. Like, it's hard to comprehend, maybe. It's so difficult to do these shows every night. It's really awkward. It's a very awkward thing to do. You know, sit there and talk to the camera for 2 hours, 5 days a week. You got to dig up everything. And you're doing it in desperation because the world needs that. The trouble we're in warrants it, right? Warranted it, that we work as hard as we can. But you can wear yourself out. I'm pretty burnt out after all these years. And I'm no longer functional. I'm dysfunctional. I'm good at nuclear, but I'm dysfunctional now after all these years and everything else. I'm completely dysfunctional. That's the way it is. That's the price you're going to pay, right? You gotta dedicate yourself to the subject that if it warrants it. And nuclear definitely deserves that kind of respect, right? It's 80 years. We're 80 years behind the 8 ball, and we got to play catch up. We got to get this planet awake and active, and we're seeing subtle hints of wins, you know. But you get so absorbed and censored so much. There's so many other factors. You can't no control over anything, and you're just trying to keep the momentum moving, keep the dream alive that the planet will come to its senses. So you're struggling, and the world passes you by every second, right? But you still gotta have blind faith to do what I'm doing. You really do. You gotta. It's total blind faith in order to not lose that passion, I guess, you know. Because you can't do it without the passion. You gotta, in my case, to hate and which will make you cynical, and then so you'll always come across as cynical, despite the fact that I adore everybody that watches these videos, everybody that helps. I absolutely adore these people, and but I don't have that personality anymore, right? I'm disenfranchised. There's very few people who can walk that walk, and just it's a difficult subject, as all of you folks that are watching it right now knows. It's a very difficult subject. You can't have that conversation with the average person. And once you learn about this stuff, you're no longer the average person, period, right? You're aware, you're not, you become cynical yourselves, obviously, right? And what happens when an electron and anti-electron, they annihilate each other, right? And so that's the path we're on. Unfortunately, we are making a difference, but we're not going to get. There's going to be no. I'm not expecting any brass bands to be playing anywhere in the future, and no ticker tape parades or anything like that. Ontario power workers get retroactive raises in 2-year contract deal. Ontario nuclear power plant workers got a great raise in Canada. Didn't even have to ask for it. 4.75% increase for the first year, retroactive. Now they're going to get, this is a big check for the last 2 years, and 3.5% for the second, plus a bonus assigning for $5,000. So they make a huge amount of money in the nuclear industry that none of them at the same job anywhere else are going to come close to making. But in nuclear, they're going to get all kinds of incentives to be monsters themselves, right? To be gatekeepers, so to speak, themselves. And now they're going to get 7% check, basically, retroactive, and then also every check forward. It's called bribery, right? But they'll cut your throat rather than point dirty at nuclear. A strange 1950s technology could bring fusion energy to the grid. Well, that technology is based on the 1904 patent. And that's the one they're using today. They can't come up with something new themselves. They're going to use this old, and they've been working on it for 50 years straight in some places. There's 20 companies currently, what they call startup, that, interesting, they get $1 billion for a startup. I don't know how you call that a startup. And they don't got to produce any results. They just got to work at it and enjoy themselves every day and go on vacations and buy cars and limousines and houses and get their children a job so they can go fill in when they're ready to retire. And they don't have to produce anything. The perfect job. And it's not going to be used for energy. It's going to be used for self-destruction or destruction of other planets in the solar system. Scientists have spent 70 years trying to pull nuclear fusion, the super hot process that powers the sun down to Earth. It works on the sun because it can expel itself into the universe and doesn't have to come back. But it also has this other attribute where the sun can eject plasma 1 million miles into the universe and then bring it back to the sun, right? And so that's why it won't work on Earth, is because we don't have those latitudes in a laboratory or in a reactor. That's the only reason nuclear fusion, and so what they're trying to do is recreate it, which is and it's not for the reason they say it, because if they wanted reliable energy, they would just go, geothermal, right? So should we build geothermal instead of fusion? It'll be the next pole. Trying to develop small modular reactors or fusion, which I should have had there, right? So why are you putting all this? If you put the money that you put into that into geothermal, we wouldn't have any energy problems anywhere on the planet currently. Currently revamping reactor designs from the 50s and 60s in hopes of launching fusion plants in the coming decades. And they've never built one. Everything's experimental. It's all just trying to mathematical equation. And they'll use every precious metal on the planet to achieve the experiment. And they don't care, every day there's 1 million children die, or 29,000 children die in a day worldwide of just dysentery, diarrhea, and pneumonia. And you can cure all of it for about a couple of pennies per child. Thomas Killinger, a physicist at the Max Planck Institute of Plasma Physics in Germany. I've covered him quite a bit over the years. I have zero respect for him. Nothing personal. But a lot of the people I worked with are incredible scumbags. So you build these contraptions knowing they're not going to work. Hard cases. And another physicist, a lot of these theoretical physicists, and their job is just to think stuff up. And right, you see all the media, we cover it constantly, all the propaganda. It's going to solve all your electricity problems. But geothermal exists. It actually exists. Check it out. It's everywhere. It's easy to do. It's under your feet. Anybody could do it. Even Canadians could probably do it. Well, not Canadians, but most people worldwide could probably do it. Issue of nuclear power plants will be discussed during visit of Emmanuel Macron's to Mongolia. So Mongolia is getting nuclear? Yeah, Dana, they're getting small modular reactors. You can build them in factories, Dana. I heard about that. It's called a Ponzi scam. Army called in to protect the Belgium nuclear plant. Woo! I was laughing when I seen that today. You mean the coal plant, Dana? No, not a nuclear plant. You mean the oil plant, Dana? No, nuclear plant. You sure about that, Dana? It wasn't a gas plant or something? No, they don't need the army for those times. They need it for your nuclear plant because you got to evacuate your country because Belgium's not very big. So goodbye Belgium in about 36 hours after the nuclear fallout. And all the countries on their borders. Being a good neighbor is not having a nuclear power plant, let me tell you that much. At the Dole Nuclear Disease Factory the Army will provide round-the-clock protection to the big disease factory in the sky. In the unlikely event of a security incident at the plant, the Army will receive additional support from the federal police. That's not supposed to mix, by the way. The Army has previously been sent to protect the Dole and the Thange nuclear power plants following Fukushima, in which a large explosion caused nuclear contamination on Japan's coast. You mean the planet Earth, right? You don't realize this contaminated Earth. I might as well show you that. Obviously, you're not aware of it. I'll get you up to speed. Just hang with me. We'll show you how it rolls. So it rolls like this. This is day 27th of March. Wait for it. 20 days after the tsunami right there. That's game over. That's game over. Yeah, James Lucid is talking about how the Soviet Union had, it was well over 1,000 lighthouses powered by nuclear generators, by nuclear fuel generators. And when the Soviet collapsed, of course, they had to clean all of these, or as many as they could, up, right? But these were in very remote locations. And you can imagine back in those days what the roads were like. And Today we got all kinds of equipment, right? But back in them days, they had very little. Yeah, and that's a story I should cover more often because it shows you how crazy the nuclear industry actually is, right? They built, I can't remember the number. Was it 18 or 1,400 or 1,800 lighthouses the Soviets had set up on the coastline were powered by nuclear batteries slash generators. In one sense, you can think about how they used to just shoot satellites into space or exploratory to go to Mars, Venus, and other planets and the moons. Some of them were powered by plutonium generators, so-called generators, right? That's a great heads up on that stuff because a lot of people don't know about that, right? I'm glad you brought it up. The Directorate for Security, the federal police, faced repeated problems in recruiting sufficient staff to fulfill its duty. Yeah, and they're trying to hire more police in Belgium. But you got to be a certain class of person to get into the police down there, and not many people want to be a police in that country for legitimate reasons, I'm sure. Scientists who led the COVID surge fired over sex misconduct. Yeah, the head scientist for the World Health Organization was a sick puppy, apparently. And he got off with it. UK reaffirms commitment to NATO's nuclear deterrent. Well, of course you do. NATO is 28 countries. If you look up NATO, it used to be, last time I looked it up, was 28 militaries. That's what it says, right? NATO, 28 militaries that work together. It's like the scariest thought imaginable. Because you hear posturing where China's sticking up for North Korea, right? You'll see endless stuff like that, or China's siding with Russia or something like that, or China. But think of 28 militaries working to undermine you, and that's what is going on with Russia, right? There's a proxy war, and it's called Ukraine. Ukraine's just where the battlefield happened to be. Nothing personal. They'll pretend it, though, in order to justify it. But it's about a proxy war. It started a long time ago. Location for nuclear sub-base in Australia is close to at least a decade away. They're going to burn through all the resources that country got. There's 7 of the biggest 10 weapons manufacturers are set up in Australia, but there's nothing to make money with. So the submarines is a good start, but it also means they got to be active, so that then they got a guaranteed income for the 7 weapons manufacturers that are out of the big 10 that are now set up in Australia after the Americans first put their base there. And you can't use them. Just want to give them dumb. If you're if you gotta have them, but don't put real nuclear weapons on these things. That's just wrong, man. That's wrong. On the road, no subs. I like it. Watch, the Air Force Security Force is trained to recapture a nuclear missile silo. First off, nobody's gonna steal a missile silo. Hollywood, I guess. It's ridiculous to spend money on something like that. They do it all the time, by the way. They recover an ICBM silo from role-playing intruders. Yeah, this is all just fakery, right? These are the bad guys, the terrorists. How long is it going to take them to snipe these guys out again? They're not using real bullets or anything like that. There's nothing realistic about it. In other words, the bad guy is not shooting back. So the hero always saves the day because the bad guy doesn't shoot back, right? Extract energy. It's like playing hockey and nobody checks you, nobody slashes you, nobody tries to take the puck away from you. The goalie gets out of the net when he sees you coming. That's what it's like, right? With the patriotic heroes. Extract energy from used nuclear fuel, says environmental group. We covered this. This was from April last month. Don't ask me why I'm covering it. Oh, yeah, because I seen that picture of Buddy hugging the cast, and that really upset me. That absurdly upset me, by the way. So nuclear waste is not a serious environmental or health threat, Dana? Except for the 450 billion gallons that just one single place in America dumped in the soil right alongside of the, Columbia River, which is equal to 6 feet wide by 515 feet tall, wrapped around the entire planet. Now, if we built a wall 6 feet tall, wide, and 518 feet tall, and wraps it around the entire planet as an anti-nuclear protest, we should do that. What are you guys doing? Well, this is just a protest. Make work protest. Going to take us a couple of decades or more, and then we're going to take it down after. But you get where I'm going with it and why I'm saying it. It's so absurd, right? Because what I'm saying is real. That's the scary part. No, there's enough there to fill up a swimming pool, Dana. Except for the 518-foot, 6-foot wide wall of nuclear waste you can put right around the planet if you dug up Hanford, just from the one dump. What about all the other national laboratories? For continued opposition to carbon-free nuclear power, right? So the nuclear industry writes the article, sends it out to the media. They wants to publish it. The media publishes it and gets a kickback. And so every day we cover these articles. And the majority of them, 97% of them, are written by the nuclear industry or lobbying groups, and the media puts their name on it to get a kickback. That's how the journalist makes their pay, see? British nuclear service company Cavendish Nuclear has been awarded a contract by Japan, because TEPCO wouldn't go near it, to provide specialist capabilities to support a decommissioning of the Manju prototype fast breeder reactor, which only ran for like a year and is... now the Manju reactors, if you put water in it, it'll detonate. If you put oxygen in it, it detonates. So they got no way to decommission it. Britain said, don't worry about it, we'll figure it out. Give us the money, we'll get around to it in 30 years. It'll take 30 years to take apart one little tiny building. Well, they're not tiny, but they're not. It's not like it's a city block or something. The reactor building will be demolished and removed by fiscal 2047. Fiscal. That's pretty... you can't quantify that assertion right now. Staff calls South Bruce Nuclear Exploration Forum very successful. The staff did. This is a nuclear waste management organization / what the hell is this creature here in Canada? They've been in business for 18 years. They got $24 billion to build a repository. And they can't do it without the community's approval, so you got to have a referendum. And nobody wants it. They're going to put it right into the farmer's field. And the idea is never to come up with a repository. Instead of going 1,000 miles north where you can't hurt anybody, they got to put it in the community, because that way nobody's going to consent to it. That way it'll never get built, and that way it's always vented into the environment. Voila. Voila, bing, bing, bang, bang, voila. So yeah, the last couple of videos, the censorship is wow. But getting good at covering major topics instead of the constant fluff, right? And so it's like any other news, really. Once you start learning about it a little bit, you start realizing the absurdity and the importance of every story. It impacts everybody, all the species, every insect, every bird, every mammal, every animal. Everything on the entire planet is impact. Every species on the planet, there's nothing on the planet that has an autoimmune trigger that can defend against radiation. And that's the problem, and they knew this for 80 years. And so we released so much into the environment, we have jeopardized the future of humanity and certainly jeopardized all species' imminent future. And this was the nuclear industry that done it to us. And they knew better, they knew what they were doing. And the planet wouldn't have consented if the truth about the industry was even a little bit known. And so there's no one out there, unfortunately, and there's so many of them, they got me censored. They got no one to pick on. I'm censored to the point where I don't even exist. But the way I see it, the policymakers, the investors will find me. And they can't, once they listen to these programs and pick up some of the information, they can't switch that off ever again, see? And when you're used to just propaganda and all of a sudden you come across someone like me, you got to reevaluate everything. And I mean everything. That's how it works. And so they can censor me all they want, but I am just going to get better every day. I'm just going to be more active. And now that I'm finally getting some health back in my life. So we got 39 votes, 92%. We got a few trolls came through and voted no. Well, why wouldn't you build geothermal instead of small modular reactors that don't exist? Why not use geothermal? Did anybody articulate why? Of course not. But it shows you this contempt, right? To even it's absurd to suggest 8% were honest. Yeah, well, that's the best I can do. I see it. We'll see everybody on Sunday. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody on the next show, which is just around the corner, Sunday night, same time as tonight's show, every show. Never early, never late. And take pride in being the hardest working anti-nuclear on the planet. So it is what it is. Have a great night, everybody. Kevin Blanche, good night, Kevin. Thank you, everybody. We'll see everybody on Sunday. The normal time. Have a great night, great weekend. Hugs for everybody. God bless everybody. We'll see everybody on the other side. Good night, everybody. We'll see everybody on Sunday. Have a great night. Have a great weekend. See you then now.